Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. It is Thursday afternoon. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I'm delighted to be joined by John Paul Mason. JP, welcome back to the show. A week has passed, yet we don't see many further forward. We'll start off at the weekend. We'll talk about all the chat since then, and we'll try and look ahead. Ticket allocations, Ultra still locked out. Loads to discuss, JP.
Yeah, there is, and your new shelving units as well, which are fully Celtic. There's no real alternative there, but that's fine. That's all
The
right.
thing is, JP, someone had the audacity a few weeks ago to criticise your backdrop, so I decided to go studs up and do the exact same myself. My OCD is going to be running wild today because I know lined up with yours, but there you go. Yeah, all Celtic, and a step closer to how the studio is going to look at some point in 2024. So thanks everybody for your patience. I know that it's probably not the way you would expect to see Acsom dialing out. However, we'll be changing it all next season. JP under wraps at the moment, but loads of good plans, and hopefully Celtic have got loads of good plans for January as well, JP. But I do have a niggling concern in the back of my head that's almost as if they don't see the concern, or they don't share the concern of us, guys like you and me, Celtic supporters. We've seen the board acting slowly or failing to react before when there's been an issue. And do they see the real extent of what's going on at the moment? Lack of quality, Rodgers unhappy with the new signings, low morale, no momentum. Do you think the board share our views? Because I always get the sense that they just think, the word entitled gets thrown about a bit, but we're just mourning for the sake of it. You should be glad that you've had all this success, which we are. But, when you're seeing the standards dropping, surely it's okay for us to raise that, discuss it, point it out.
Well, it is, but I mean, there's ways and means of doing that. I don't know whether verbally abusing board members at the game on Saturday. I saw a bit of commotion over there from my side of the ground. I obviously don't know what was said, don't know how bad it was or whatever, and how many people were involved. The sack the board chance, I mean, I don't know if that's a little bit premature. I think there's definitely ire to be aimed there, but to hear sack the board chance kind of shocked me a little bit. Definitely shocked me, considering I know we go on about it all the time, but obviously we are of that vintage that remember the original sack the board chance, and you do wonder what age people were that were singing sack the board on Saturday. What was it, guys ages with me and you, or was it people that have picked that up from their dads or uncles or brothers or whatever and just decided to regurgitate it? I don't know, but obviously, yeah, there's no getting away from the fact that there's problems at the moment, and there's problems, as we've talked about many times in here, about the recruitment. It's all very well because I was thinking about it and going, well, we've beaten Feyenoord in a Champions League game, a Feyenoord team that wanted to win. We've drawn 2-2 with Atletico Madrid. We've amassed the points total that we've amassed before now. So clearly, the players in the squad are capable of getting results. There's no doubt about it. I just think it's when the squad gets exhausted and then you're relying on people to do it week in, week out. It's those people can't do it week in, week out. And that's kind of what Brendan Rodgers has said, that you need to have that mentality to see yourself through a game and win a game when it's ugly, like it was at Rugby Park, and ultimately like it was on Saturday as well, because things just went against us. I don't really know what with marking was going on, what was going on with the marking at the corner, and how you leave a striker like Shankland unmarked at the back post to just have
acres of space,
free header to put them one up. One up is a small hill to climb. 2-0 suddenly became a mountain. And whilst I did gripe at the time about the free kick, and I was said to guys about me, I was like, I look forward to seeing that again to see if that was a free kick. I've seen it back about 5 or 6 times. I still don't think it's a free kick. However, there's a lot to happen after that, and the guys obviously put it away, absolutely brilliantly. You can't argue with that. So then 2-0, that's when you're looking for the character of your players to to do something. And this current team, haven't really faced that level of adversity. So it might be the case that they just think it's too big an ask for them to come back 2-0 down against Hearts. When Hearts haven't really played that well, they've had 2 chances and they've scored 2 goals. And
it was about containment. It was about containment, JP, wasn't it? They didn't create a great deal, did they?
Not really, no. But then you sometimes don't need to do that. You have smash and grab results all the time. But it was up to us and how we dealt with that situation. And we just were relying upon people that have now had opportunities. I don't want to single him out, but Mikey Johnston's had several opportunities now to prove to us that he's worth a first team jersey at Celtic Park. And on the basis of what we've seen so far, he's not. So that's when you're looking to get the players back in that have been out injured. Like Maeda, don't think Maeda was going to be the magic wand that was suddenly going to make everything better, but he has to come back and start playing in the system that Brendan Rodgers wants to play at Celtic. But it goes back to the recruitment, and we're relying upon these guys in the middle of December, in the middle of a tough run of games, and they haven't proved that they can do that they can be that player that gets us out of a hole. Or Lewis Palma flatters to deceive. I think sometimes. I think he's obviously got it in him to score goals. He's got talent, but we needed him at Easter Road at 0-0. We needed him on Saturday, and to be substituting Lewis Palma for a left back who we all know is quite loudly out there that he's not got a future at Celtic Park. I mean, I think these are the last days of Alexandro Bernabe at Celtic Park. There's no doubt about it. So to be bringing a guy on like that to hope and pray that he's going to do something down that left wing, whether it's cross a ball in or score a goal, I think it was a sad state. It was a sad indictment of what we've got in our locker at the moment to play when that's what we're putting on. And then to shift him about again to move him back to left back when Forrest comes on was just even more wild. But I mean, Saturday's a huge game now. It was always going to be. Every one of these games, as I said about 2 or 3 weeks ago, that December we had so many games and they were all packed together that you've got to just get the results. So Saturday's about getting the result, and how we go about that is not really a concern to me as long as we do it.
The big thing as well, the final game going into that, JP, and I know that by that point we're out the Champions League. You were hearing rumblings online. There was a lot of tickets being swapped, Celtic spares, etc. There was a lot of availability, and to a degree, some people might have checked out a wee bit from that particular game. And what we were saying from the Acsom perspective was it's part of a 4-game run whereby we play Feyenoord and then we're up against Hearts, then it's Livingston, it's Dundee. And in that 4 games, because of the Kelly game, it was about trying to, bring back a flow and a rhythm to the team, get the momentum flowing, get some wins behind you, and then you go into the Rangers game. Because personnel, other than people coming back from injuries, you can do nothing about that. You're working with the group of players you've got if you're Brendan Rodgers. So it's about trying to get that momentum. And we've gone into that Feyenoord game, and I felt brilliant. I thought, excellent. That's stage 1 of this wee small phase of games to try and prepare for Rangers completed. Not a vintage performance, but I felt like we played as though the shackles had come off, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, right, okay, Lagerbielt's back in the favour, and there's somebody else that we might be able to work with. And then there was this kind of random element to the team selection. And you've already mentioned Bernabe. I think to myself, what are you bringing to the party? At any point, nothing. Absolutely nothing. I would have much rather have had someone like Mitchell Frame in there where there's a bounce to the young guy coming in, JP. Put him on the bench if you need him, bring him in. I mean, his confidence will never be as high as it was after that game against Feyenoord, yet he drops out of the squad. And the other guy, of course, was Gustav Lagerbielke. You and I banging on about Lager, talking about your memories of Underworld. And we were really buoyant on Thursday last week following that. And so I imagine what the 2 players, Lagerbielke and Frame, felt like. And then they're dropped from the squad. And you're looking at that bench, Bernabe and Kwon are on that bench. I don't understand that. And I know that we could go through certain players who need to step up, certain players that you're now questioning their mentality, a word that's been used by Brendan Rodgers. Then you're looking at the board issue. I'm going to come back to that. I've got my thoughts on that as well. But then you look at the gaffer, Brendan Rodgers, and he needs to be laser focused, as I said there, between now going into January. There's quite a lot of this responsibility on the gaffer as well, JP, isn't there? I mean, that was a bizarre team selection, wasn't it?
It was, but I mean, I don't think that Lagerbielke scoring that goal suddenly equaled to me, all right, he has to start on Saturday, because that's not what he's in the team to do. Fair enough, it was an amazing moment and all the rest of it, but there's obviously been a judgment made, whether it's right or wrong, about him, and the signs are from the things that we hear and read. Stephen McGowan's article, whether or not that's, gospel or not, I don't know, but it certainly usually points the way when it comes to how things are going to play out. And I mean, Lagerbielke scoring that goal, obviously a great moment for him, but the writing's on the wall for him, I think, before that goal goes in. I can't remember. I listened to Homeboys and Tim's podcast in the last couple of days, and someone on that, and I forget who, so apologies, pointed out that Joe Hart was seen at the end of the game with Lagerbielke, and if you read him, he said, "No matter what happens," or something similar. No matter what happens, like as if to say, "You've done this and you've made a mark." So that would indicate, without being a rocket scientist, that he might not have long left at the club, and that's a huge, huge, huge issue in the fact that we've signed somebody who clearly should have been scouted better and hasn't been, and therefore has come in. We've spent this money on him. He's made the move to another country. He's only a young guy, and I think he's like 23 or something. Still, you're asking a guy to uproot from his home country, come to play in another country with the hope of playing first team football, or maybe the promise of playing first team football, and then suddenly he's reassessed when he's at the club and he's not deemed the quality that we were looking for, or the type of player that we are looking for. We can't afford to make mistakes like that in the transfer market. We've said that so many times. We can't afford to just
another $3 million down
away. I know, it's so wild. And $4 million in Bernabei or whatever it was, or the thick end of $4 million in Bernabei, he's going to probably leave with little return. And we've said this so many times. That's the worst thing that we can see as a Celtic supporter, is our club spending money badly. And like I said about any signing that comes in January, simply has to be signed off by the manager. Will people now be questioning whether or not we should be allowing Brendan Rodgers to have that power? But ultimately, we do, because I don't want to hear post-match interviews with Brendan Rodgers where he's talking about Terminado or I've got about 1 million wingers, or we just don't want to hear.
Don't, JP. It's like a bad nightmare remembering the interviews, and it's almost, I'm not going to say it's history repeating itself, but that was down to recruitment. It was down to recruitment, not being given the quality that he needed and he wanted. And, people might still say, oh, but Brendan Rodgers said in the AGM that he signs off all the players, right? I get that he said that, but he clearly doesn't or hasn't, JP. I mean, you've got Lagerbielke, and I'm the same as yourself. I wouldn't have started him at the weekend. I wouldn't have just thrown him in there. I think that you've got a central defensive partnership there in Carter Vickers and Scales at the moment that is the best partnership we've got, and if they're fit to play. To drop him from the bench, someone argued, well, Stephen Welsh would have been the other guy being dropped. Does he deserve to get dropped? And I get that argument. No, he doesn't. I thought Welsh did really well when he played against Feyenoord. So I get it. And you don't want to have two centre-halves on the bench. Right, that's fine. But what it says to me is that Brendan Rodgers clearly, and it's no secret, doesn't rate Gustav Lagerbielke. You can take it from some of the really good sources that are out there, JP, but I mean, we've obviously got our own information as well, and we knew that the gaffer didn't rate him. And when it comes down to that, it's easy to look at certain players and say, well, he doesn't rate them, or they're definitely not ready, so they're one for the future. And I think one or two of the guys that came in could well fall into that category. I think Odin Holm falls into that category, and I think Marco Tilio could well fall into that category. If they're not going to play between now and the end of the season, though, JP, I think probably not home because he's had a bit of game time. But guys like Tilio and Kwon, if they're not going to play, and you do think there's something there for the future, get them loaned out. Get them loaned out and playing games because, you know, it's almost as if Tilio, £2.5 million. Big buy in the summer. He's not going to play. So get them loaned out. The guys that you've had enough of a look at and you think, I don't rate him, he's not going to play for me, move them on. You've just got to move them on. I mean, I don't know how much you're going to get back. I think we've done business in the past where we've lost a shed load of money on players, JP, but if he's going to be sitting there and apparently he's on 14 grand a week, not playing, you've just got to move them on. And what that says, that examples more than any other example shows Brendan Rodgers wasn't signing off a lot of these players. Right? And I'm not saying he's lying, JP, but you're not going to sit at an AGM and say, oh, by the way, all these guys to my left signed the players. I'm just a coach here. You can never admit that, can you? For two reasons. The players that are in question aren't going to think that you back them. The ones that you do want to get a tune out of, you know, guys like Palmer who you're asking to play, you're not going to get a tune out of them when he knows the gaffer's not signed them or doesn't rate them. And also, you've just been employed by these guys. So you're not going to go against them this soon in, you know, 6 months down the line. You're not going to then say, oh, by the way, it's a shambles. That recruitment strategy that I spoke so highly of is rubbish. You can't do it. You can't do it. So he had to say that, didn't he, really?
There's one moment on Saturday in the second half, I think, and I saw Matt O'Reilly react. Because where I sit, you're not that far from the pitch, so you can kind of see players' reactions, their facial expressions, the way they throw their hands up and all the rest of it. And O'Reilly was absolutely... This is a guy... So Matt O'Reilly and Lewis Palmer do their wee kind of high-five handshake thing when they score a goal, right? That's fine. I'm no problem with that.
Are you okay with that, JP?
Well...
I'm going to interject. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm all right with that.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping in. I'm going back. You remember Ryan Giggs and Paul Ince used to do it?
Yes.
It did my head in. It did my head in back then.
Lee Sharp used to do the Elvis thing with the corner flag.
He did, aye.
Cantona could do whatever he wanted. I mean, Larson did the tongue sticking it. But no, anyway, I digress. They have that relationship, so they're obviously quite pally on the pitch or whatever that they do that. But Matt O'Reilly was absolutely raging with Palmer for making the wrong decisions, and you could see it. And he was so frustrated, and that's the worry, is that you've got these players who are good enough to play first team football for Celtic, but when they're surrounded by people that are a few percent down on the rankings next to them, then that's going to obviously impact their game as well, and they'll be frustrated. Then you've got the Kyogo issue, which is not going away. And I read the article in the Herald this morning. It might have been this morning's Herald. Charles McGarry, is that name ring a bell? I think that's who wrote it. And basically saying, what's the problem with Kyogo? And they attributed a quote at the start of his article, which you could have attributed to Brendan Rodgers, but it was actually Ange Postecoglou that said something like, he's like any other striker. When they don't score for a few games, then the whole world collapses in on them. And the article was basically pointing to the fact that this isn't a first time for Kyogo having a barren spell, and he had barren spells under Ange Postecoglou. But he was on, I think he's on 6 goals this season, and he scored his 11th goal of the season in the corresponding fixture against Livingston last season. So he obviously is quite clearly a way off it. Otherwise, he misses that chance against Hearts at the start of the second half, which could have been the beginning of a comeback. And then when the rest of the team are looking around and seeing the talisman missing a chance like that, the heads could go. I mean, they shouldn't, because they're professional football players being paid handsomely. But you could be forgiven for being like, all right, it really isn't our day. If he's missing a chance like that, then we're on to plums. So
we're doomed. Yeah.
Aye, but no, the Kyogo thing. I don't. People obviously say, oh well, it's because of the new style of play and everything else. I just think it's look who's been playing on the wing for us, and not getting crosses, and the amount of times we hit the first man with a cross is unbelievable. Like, may as well just. I mean, the amount of corners we had as well. The corner, every corner that came from one of those crosses that hit off a first defender, we didn't do anything with the corners either. We just never seemed to be able to threaten from a
too
corner.
easy to defend from a corner, JP. I've said it. You know, it's like honest. A team like Livingston, St Johnstone, Motherwell, Hearts. These teams will find it really easy to defend against us, and then we're giving them the opportunity to score really easy goals against us. That's key. That's absolutely key. But you know, sometimes you can talk about football and it can become overcomplicated when you're trying to figure out what's wrong. And I think in the final third, like you say there, right, it's a collective in that Kyogo is the focal point there. But it all comes from the delivery, and he's not getting the deliveries, and then the head might dip. And as you say, yeah, they're professional footballers on massive wages, but it does kick in. It kicks into their state of mind. It kicks into their mentality. I love the fact that O'Reilly was having a go at Palma. I think that's absolutely what we need. We need the clutchy players who are at the top of their game, JP, continuing not to drop their own standards to get everybody else back up to that standard. And if Palma's not doing it, I think it's absolutely key. I'd much rather see him shouting and screaming at him than doing that wee daft celebration. However, if he does a celebration, it means I've scored the goal, so I'm happy with it as well.
That was my thinking on it. But there was, when you actually think about it, we're relying on Matt O'Reilly in the same way that we're relying on Callum McGregor. Callum McGregor's 30 and the captain of Celtic. Matt O'Reilly's 22 and hasn't played consistently at this level. He's still finding his feet at this level, but we are relying on a guy like that. By the way, also a guy that we paid virtually nothing for. What was that, $1.5 million or something like that? Was that the kind of set fee?
Daylight robbery.
It totally is robbery, but and obviously you could point to that as being an example of, well, that's when you could spend low and make it big. But those are they're kind of outliers. Like the Dembele signing was an outlier as well.
You're right. They're not a rule. You're right. They're every now and again that might happen, but don't go looking for it every single transfer window because it's not going to come along.
No, I mean, and as well as that, the January transfer window round the corner. We've had very few successful January transfer windows. Let's face it. There's been a couple. The Maeda one where we got the 3 players in before the window had even opened. That was an amazing one. And if you remember, was it the first? It was Angie's first season that we were really kind of just sort of limping towards the January transfer window in the hope that we would get the right type of players in. And that would have been the Maeda transfer, would that be the first transfer window, the first January transfer window?
January, yeah. His first winter transfer window.
We were limping towards that, and just in the hope that we could stay in touch and then look to push on, and that's precisely what happened. Obviously, the game was moved because of COVID into February, and then we all know what happened that night. Completely obliterated them. With a full house of our own support. So that is kind of the same as we were going now, but they have to get this right. They have to get every aspect possibly right that they can, whether it's personnel going out on loan or permanently, or people coming in on loan or permanently. Like whatever loan signings we get in, it can't be people that are miles off it in terms of fitness and confidence and everything else. Whoever we get in has to be somebody that's been sprung and ready to play for whatever team they're playing for, but maybe just haven't had the run of games or whatever, but they have to be fit. We can't be getting people in that are going to take a month or two to get up to fitness, because, I mean, there's examples from the past of other teams who have signed players who have been miles off it in terms of fitness and not really got going until the season's over. Yeah. So we whoever we get in, they need to be absolutely ready to just land into that team and be able to contribute and be able to not frustrate the good players that are already there, that are able to bring those players alive and make them the best players that they can be at Celtic, because currently even our best players aren't our best players.
They're all, for me, it's almost as like everybody's getting dragged down a few notches. And when you're talking about players coming in, that was key to Ange Postecoglou's first season. The fact, I know it's a bit of a cliche now, talk about hit the ground running, but it was key because they quite frankly had to. We had to have that immediate impact, and it's the immediate impact player that is described in the chairman's statement. You know, when the financials were announced, the chairman's statement spoke about that type of player versus the development player that we've already mentioned, and that's the type of player that we need. Now, the big thing is you could look at Nat Phillips as a perfect example of a player who has got the experience, so-called. But I pointed out online, and I got a bit of flack for it, that although he's got experience, he's not got a huge amount of experience. He barely played football at the age of 26, JP. And
like
actually
50 games or something.
Well, what I did, I looked at his minutes, because I know back in the day, you never used to think about minutes, did you? It was always like 217 appearances, 5 subs, 6 goals, whatever. And now, obviously, looking at minutes. And the actual stat was, right, I was looking at Nat Phillips at 26 years of age. And I looked at all the senior football he had played to this point. And then I looked at Callum McGregor, who I know is a kind of bionic man. I get it, right? But it was just to show the two ends of the scale. And during the season when McGregor was 26, he played just about as much football as Nat Phillips has played in his entire career. That was the differential. So people go, oh, Champions League experience coming from the EPL, I get it all. But he's not really played much football. And if he's not played much football, JP, and then you're asked to play 2 games a week, and I'm talking every game has to be won, cup games, league games, Champions League games, he's not used to that intensity. He's not used to, I know he's coming from a big club in Liverpool and all the rest of it, but he's not playing 2 weeks of football, 2 games of football a week, rather, for Liverpool, and expected to win at that level for Liverpool, because he's not got the minutes in his legs. So we don't need that type of player. The other, the kind of flip side is Carter Vickers. Although he hadn't played much football for Spurs, he played a lot of football. You know, he'd taken his opportunities to get loan deals. He'd gone out there and he'd played football. Ordinarily, I wouldn't really want us to do the whole loan thing, because I think we've been stung in the past more often than not. But under the circumstances, I just want quality. And if that quality has to be a loan player, JP, I'll be quite happy with that this time round.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we obviously have got many examples of players that have come in on loan, and we've contributed to them becoming millionaires, multi-millionaires, and they've given us very little in return. But like you say, it's the responsibility of having to do a job for a club as big as this, and do it week in, week out. And by the way, I don't think his namesake should be forgiven for his first half performance. I thought Alistair Johnston was way off it in the first half. And I actually said I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't come back out in the second half.
Was it tactical or was it due to his performance? Was there an injury there?
I don't know. I've not heard anything about an injury, but just based on the 45 minutes that I saw,
yeah,
he was making a player in Mikey Johnson who already looks not great, and he was making him look even worse by his distribution to him. And by the way, I'm not saying that that's the reason why Mikey Johnson didn't play well, because whenever Mikey Johnson did get down the wing, it was hitting the first man. He wasn't beating that last man or attempting to beat the last man ever. So,
have you run out of patience with him, JP?
I think I probably have. I think I would obviously give all players my support, but I think when a guy's had a run of games, and he has had a run of games, which is the thing that you always say a player needs. I mean, obviously, I would absolutely love it if he played on Saturday and finally turned it on and fit. Because obviously, the more you do something, then the more likely you are to succeed. But in his case, you've got such a dossier of history that tells you that he's not going to succeed, because he hasn't done for 5 years, and he's been out on loan, which is what he probably needed. And I think now we're seeing that it's maybe not just going to happen for him at Celtic, and that's not any massive crime. It's just a case of that can happen with anybody. It's like, well, at some point, someone has to make the decision and be like, right, between the player and the club, this isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
I need to move on. You need me to move on because you want to free up my wages that you've given me, because he's on a 5-year deal, isn't he? So a sensible conversation needs to be had. Whether those sensible conversations have already been had, and that's what's impacting the team, because we're having to call upon people that have been told. Again, this was brought up somewhere else on either Homeboys or E-Tims, and there's a very good point that is it the case that these conversations have been had already, and you're having to go to these players like Turnbull, like Johnston, like Bernabe, and ask for a tune out of them when they know that they're completely
surplus
to the requirements. So that's the conundrum. But there was a lot of abuse flying around after Saturday, and people kind of bewildered walking out. And I saw a few tweets calling Brendan Rodgers out.
Ooh.
I mean,
let's talk about that, because there's a few people in here, right? I'll bring in Jungle Line, contributes regularly, if not every day, just about every single day to the stream. And Jungle Line says, has Rodgers got 3 games to save his Celtic career? I think the sack the board chance, to go back to that, it's not even about them being premature. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. When we were singing sack the board, and there was banners and there was boycotts back in the 90s, that's because something could be done to overturn the custodians of the club back then. Something definitely could be done. And it was street movements that started the movement, and obviously you had the engagement between guys like Fergus McCann and the Celts for Change guys, Matt McGlone, etc. And it was very, very well planned, and it was epic actually looking back on it, and the fact that it's a massive anniversary of that next year should always be celebrated. But there was a point to it, is what I'm saying. I think singing sack the board or chanting sack the board now is basically just telling them we're not happy with you. We all know we can do nothing about that side of things, just because of the corporate structure of the club, and as it is, sack the manager. I don't agree with that at all. I think if you do that, then you're going to have a situation where you can write this season off, absolutely, and then there's going to be an impact next season as well. And then the guy you bring in, there's no guarantee there. You look at the managers we were linked to, JP. I can't remember off the top of my head who you wanted, because we were dealing with a list of guys who may or may not have been genuine candidates for Celtic. I wanted Rodgers, of course I do, but I'm not going to be walking about with my eyes closed to any of the deficiencies directly caused by him if things aren't going well. I've seen a lifeless Celtic team at the weekend. 30 minutes in, you're 2-0 down. You've still got an hour. And I've seen nothing in that hour. Against Kilmarnock, when you realise that you're playing the game for 100 minutes, you've got another 10 minutes. It was actually, I think it ran on to about 113. And I seen nothing during that time. No fight, the mentality was all wrong, no creativity. It was lifeless. And I think that a lot of that comes from the gaffer, because the gaffer has, apparently, I mean, I'm talking about how he appears in public, JP, and in the pressers, seems a lot more passive. I had a great conversation yesterday with someone who is a Sunderland fan. We're talking about Martin O'Neill, right? And I said to him, I truly believe we got the best out of Martin O'Neill. There's a moment in a football player's career and in a manager's career where everything is right, both their form, their decision-making, but it's the spark, JP, that I feel is missing. And when we had Martin O'Neill, and we were showing the footage on Monday night at the Mialby gig at Graces, when Martin O'Neill came to the steps, and I was looking at him and I'm thinking, he's never been better than that moment. He was fully energetic, he was fully fire, he had the fire in his belly, and he had that spark. And this is my biggest worry about Rodgers. Has he lost that? Has he lost that spark? That's the big thing for me.
I mean, they're obviously pointing to the Kilmarnock and the Hearts games and the reaction or lack of reaction, but then you could also point to Perth. And he came out after that game and said that it was the angriest he'd ever been as a manager at half-time. So,
yeah,
and the players all acknowledged that they'd got a hairdryer at half-time and they'd responded. I just don't get how you can be angry as a manager, get a response from your players in the second half, beat Feyenoord, get beat off Kilmarnock the following week, and then beat Feyenoord, and then get beat off Heart. I mean, it's so But I've been thinking about it, and I think it's so like that because you're relying on players who haven't
checked out.
Or either have checked out or just because they haven't done the business for Celtic on a consistent basis. Like Yang hasn't done the business for Celtic on a consistent. Johnston, Mikey hasn't done the business. Even Palmer hasn't done the business on a consistent basis. Showed flashes, fair enough. Scored the Champions League, can't question that. But he hasn't been that guy that's just had consistent numbers. You know, either an assist or a goal every week, and that's what you need at Celtic. You have to have players like that who are going to do that. So that's probably why it's been like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to get back to that.
Definitely.
just you know,
as long as that isn't a flat line.
Well,
get that consistency. The thing is, JP, if you've got like different collections of players in there, you've got the Matt O'Reilly type of player who is still looking at his season and thinking, right, I'm scoring all these goals, I'm at the top of my game, I'm getting Champions League man of the match performances, I've broken into the Danish squad, and he's like thriving for every game and he really wants to make an impression. You've got that level, and by the way, he's in a group of very, very few players at that kind of level at the moment. Then you've got the guys who haven't been playing football regularly, and there's loads of them in our squad, which is why we keep going on about the bloated nature of the squad. And you're asking them, like off the bat, right, you're in the squad and I want you to perform immediately. That was why Ralston was such an anomaly when he came in. That was so unusual for a footballer to be out the picture all but twice, I think, 2 games in 18 months for Celtic. Throw him in, perform. It's so difficult for a player. And then that's the type of player that you've got with Mikey Johnson, for example. And then you're bringing in a whole clutch of guys, like you've suggested, who might have already been told, you're not in my plans. We're going to try and get you out in January, but you're actually going to have to be in my squad now. Then you've got another group of players, I think, who, when it comes to the confidence player, Kyogo, for example, undoubted talent. 3 of the best moments of this season have come from him. 3 of the best goals have come from Kyogo. 2 in the Champions League, 1 against Rangers. Most important goal of the season so far.
By the way, could easily be forgotten about given our current predicament. It's until somebody actually like yourself says that, you could be forgiven for forgetting the fact that he scored against Atletico Madrid, he scored against Rangers at Ibrox, and people go, oh, well, that wasn't the current Rangers team. It is the current Rangers team.
Yeah.
It's they might have a different manager, but it's still the same team pretty much. Well, it is the same team.
Same group of players, absolutely.
So that definitely has to be highlighted, I would agree.
But that's a disjointed nature. And I mentioned maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago about the mentality thing, which is always in my mind because it can turn great players into mediocre players if they're not tuned in. And if you bring in, and this is my point that I made a few weeks back, if you bring in 9 players, JP, then it can seriously affect the overall mentality of the group because you're looking at just under 30% of your group, your squad. And if none of them have come from a winning mentality, if none of them have come from a club whereby you play 2 games a week, you must win every single game. Otherwise, serious questions will be asked. Then you've got a group of players there who the whole kind of culture and mentality can swing the wrong way. And that was my concern with bringing in so many bodies because, Odenholm, I think he's got potential. Yang, we've seen flashes. Palmer, inconsistent and indisciplined as well. And you could go through them all. Tilio, haven't seen enough of them. Kwon, haven't seen any of them. Nawrocki, absolute dilemma around whether or not he's going to have a future, JP. A total enigma at the moment. Why is he not playing? Apparently he's training and he's not showing the personality. Lagerbielke, massive red flag towards what happened in the recruitment. I'm going to take a step back for a bit.
Bernardo as well. I mean, I would probably suggest if there was an option to cut that deal short, I would do that because we've had so many throws of the dice in that third position in the midfield, and none of them have grabbed it. If Paulo Bernardo on loan cannot take that midfield place and make it his in the time that we've had him and the time when we've needed him, then I would suggest he's probably never going to do it. So if you can get him out of his loan deal and back to his parent club, that frees up a spot and a wage for someone that could come in either permanently or on loan. But again, that's back to the scouting and recruitment. Like, someone signed that off. Someone said that was a good idea. And is it the same person that said Jota was a good idea, or is it a different person?
And Araujo, if that's how you pronounce him, I know he's not at Benfica, but he came through at Benfica as well. But I think you're right about Bernardo. I would do exactly what we did with Abelgar and Maurice Jens, and I would cut that short. It's not worked. But I'm going to ask you though, in the absence of Hatate, we have seen Holm, Iwata, Turnbull, and Bernardo. And Alan Morrison pointed out last week that it's almost as if they were all played for very specific reasons against specific opposition. Bernardo got the nod in the Champions League, and it depended on the defensive nature of the team we were playing as to whether or not David Turnbull got a game. I'm going to ask you the question, out of the four, who's impressed you the most, JP? Because you're right, none of them have, stapled their colours to the mast in terms of, I'm a first-team player, look at my performances. None of them have. But of the four, who's impressed the most? Because one of them is going to be playing this weekend.
Are they though? I mean, could he do something different on Saturday? Perhaps, I don't know. If he could maybe mix it up and play somebody else there, or not play three in the midfield. Does he do something different? I mean, we have watched it. Watching that whole Hearts game felt like we were watching the same game of football every 2 minutes. It was just like a repeat. Celtic on the ball in that game was just like the same 2 minutes over and over and over again, which is why my confidence in us even getting one goal back started to kind of dissipate as that second half wore on. You're just like, where's this coming from? Where are we getting 3 goals from? It's not. It actually made me think of when I was 20 and I moved to live in France. I had to go to Nice for 6 months to live. Sounds like a chore. It definitely wasn't. It was just an amazing time in my life. But the day that I left to go to France, and some people remember this was the John Barnes season, as I was getting on the flight, Celtic were 2-0 up at Celtic Park against Hearts. And when I got off the flight at the other side, we'd been beaten 3-2, and I just couldn't help but shake that thought from my mind when I was at that game on Saturday. I was just like, wow, I don't think I've ever seen us lose to Hearts at Celtic Park. And then you go back to, it was 2007 was the last time they beat us at Celtic Park, and that was the first back-to-back league games that we've lost since 2013. So
what frustrates me, right, is when certain people in the media are asked the question and they wheel out things like, but they've gone this length of time. Right, I get all that. Celtic will always have big runs, JP, but this is the culmination of poor form. Really topsy-turvy. I've called it Jekyll and Hyde form. You see the good performance a few times this season, sometimes in Europe, followed by a dreadful performance, lifeless, absolutely lacking in ideas, energy, momentum. I'm going to ask you actually, because you brought up a good point. I was already going to ask, Celtic playing against Livingston, should we really be approaching that in the same kind of shape and in the same style as we would Lazio at home? And I think the answer is undoubtedly no. So it does give you the opportunity to shake things up. And I'm going to ask, and we're going to throw it out to the commenters as well. Over 1,000 watching live. Thanks everybody for getting involved. What do you think? Do we change shape? Can we go to a 3-5-2? Are we able to play with 2 up top? This missing jersey since Hatate's been injured this season, let's just not try and fill it. Let's try and change the shape of it, JP. I think we've got the personnel to do it.
Well, 3-5-2. Got Maeda back as well, so you could play potentially either Maeda and Kyogo up top, or Maeda and O and Kyogo. That would be the initial sort of train of thought. But like you said, it should be getting approached in a different manner to other games. But with regards to like the back-to-back losses, a guy commented on when I was talking about the Kilmarnock loss, and I likened it to the St Mirren loss under Ange Postecoglou. I wasn't saying that it was necessarily the same. I was just more pointing out that a defeat can happen along the way when even if you're playing really well, as we were at that time, we just out of nowhere couldn't beat St Mirren, got beat comprehensively 2-0, and it was fair and square. But that wasn't then followed up with a home defeat. So there's obviously a difference in my thought process of how I was thinking after Kilmarnock away, and now I've seen us lose back to back, and certainly losing at home to a Hearts team who aren't that great. I mean, they've worked hard and everything else, and they've obviously got a goal scorer, a guy in Kingsley who can definitely hit a free kick, as was pointed out just before he hit it by Eddie's grandson behind me, Pierce, who was like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure he said, can Kingsley not hit a free kick?" And as soon as the ball left his foot, an expletive came from Pierce's mouth, which I knew meant that was in. I knew it looked like it was going in from my angle, but the F word that was uttered by him as soon as the ball left his foot meant that I knew that it was in. So, just to refer to that, with regards to the away defeat, wasn't then followed up with a home defeat. So this is a different situation we're in now. But of the players that you asked me there, nudging just ahead is Awata of all of them.
I'd agree with that.
Only because I've seen enough from him in some of the games where to suggest that he could be a Celtic player going forward. There's as in a Celtic player who plays every week. That's how I consider someone as a Celtic player. If it's someone that I know is going to play a run of games, and the other midfielders that have come in at this point in time don't make me think that.
No, the good thing I think, if you're going to you could say it's a 3-5-2, but obviously when you're defending, it's easy enough then. Let's say Stephen Welsh is playing as part of the three at the back, JP. He has experience of playing right back, so you can cover the right-hand side. Scalesy can do the same on the left. Awata can drop back. And then, you can defend with four at the back. So I think it is something, and it's not just about throwing something in the air and hopefully it works. I do think you've got to play to our strengths in terms of the personnel. Mader's got to start as well. And I think, obviously, if you're playing two up top, it's really to try and get over this bad form that Kyogo's found himself in. We can use cliches and say being a striker's a confidence thing, being a goalie's a confidence thing. I totally get it. But Kyogo could score a hat-trick this weekend, and he's up to 9, and he's only 2 short from the corresponding fixture last season, and everything starts to change. But we just can't get out the bit, JP. We can't get over that wee hump at the moment, and it's a bit of a concern. There's loads to talk about. I'm going to bring in the two ends of the scale here, right? The first one coming in from Marquis, who just wants us to talk about music all day. I can get that, by the way, rather than talk about recruitment, stacking the board and everybody else. And Celt88 disagrees. Know the music again. Well, listen, right, I'm going to use that as an opportunity to say, look at my mug, right? Don't know if anybody's noticed it. This is a Liam Gallagher mug, and I love it. And it says, YT, why not? So I like that. I play on words. I used to have an Ian Brown one, JP, and people have asked me, why don't you use it anymore? I'm very superstitious, and that was during the pandemic season, so I ditched it. And a pal of mine, John Neary, came along to the studio one day. He used to be in a band back in the day, and I gifted him it. He said, where'd you get that mug? I said, you can have it. And it's got bad luck written all those streams during the pandemic. I've got that Ian Brown mug every time, so it's gone. But the reason I'm bringing up the bold Liam, love him or loathe him, he's a rock and roll star. He's a great front man. You have had the pleasure of meeting him, spending a bit of time with him, JP. And today's announcement is just blowing my mind. I would say my two favourite bands of all time are Oasis and the Stone Roses. And they've combined. Liam and John Squire are releasing new music. It's been announced this morning. You can pre-order it. It didn't give you a snippet of the tune in amongst that wee kind of montage, I don't think.
Even in the last few seconds, I'm sure the last few seconds you got. Because the Oasis podcast retweeted it and put like the sound of that riff or something like that. So
I've seen that, right? So there is a bit at the end. Brilliant. I'll listen back to that. I'm buzzing about that, JP. And because you've said don't talk about music, I'm sorry. I'm on that bit now. It's Squire and Gallagher recording music together. That is absolutely insane.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I mean, I massive Stone Roses fan when I was a wee guy, and then never got to see them properly until I was working T in the Park. So when you're working T in the Park, everybody thinks you get to just see everything, but you're at a stage, you're looking after the bands at a stage, you're not going to get to just wander about as much as maybe you'd like to. But I did get to see the end of the Stone Roses set. I think it was 2014 last year at Bolado. And that was huge for me. I mean, people will say they're not the best live or anything like that, but it's still those songs, and those songs are anthems.
Chemistry. It was the chemistry. It was the energy. You're
the
right.
Songs are anthems from when I was wee, and I was into them in primary school when I had no right to be into Stone Roses and Happy Mondays and everything else. It should have been dancing to Jive Bunny and the Master Mixers or whatever. But no, I got into them just through pals, Big Brothers and stuff like that. So, and then, you know, there is no Liam Gallagher without Ian Brown. I mean, he basically has completely copied his entire image and style. I obviously put a bit of his own spin on it as well.
Totally. And he realises it, though, doesn't he? He accepts that Brown was his biggest influence. I can't remember the gig, but he's seen them in Manchester, I think. And he just realised that's what I want to be. Yeah, I want to be that guy. I always remember.
In the same token, Noel Gallagher saw Johnny Marr on Top of the Pops and was just like, I want to be as cool as that guy.
You know who I seen on Top of the Pops and wanted to be? Adam and the Ants. So there's maybe an image out there with all the makeup. I don't know. Maybe it is. But what I always remember, 1996 Reading, right, when the Roses, obviously, it was the final gig before they split up for good. And then they came back, obviously, in 2012. But Reading, someone was leaving. I read I've still got the NME somewhere, but I read the review, and it was like someone was walking away from the main stage, uttering under his breath, "Who does that guy think he is? Liam Gallagher." So it kind of came full circle, and that was the end of the Roses, but they came back. Yes, there's loads of things happening in the world of Celtic. I totally get it. But this is Liam Gallagher and John Sclair we're talking about here. Come on. Double Denim. Afternoon, I think the next few games are key in determining how much surgery we need in January. For me, there is still a league-winning squad there if we stay injury-free and utilise players properly. See, the problem I've got, JP, right, is how bad we think it is right now. Bottle it. That's how bad it is, and that's how we need to be approaching January. Even if we went on a wee winning streak here and won the next 3 games comfortably, including the Rangers game, makes no difference to me. We still need major surgery on this squad because I just think there's been some bad timing. We talk about it being a treble-winning squad, absolutely, but it's a treble-winning squad less 5, not even just less 3, less 5 players. You know, if you want to say Yakimakis and Juranovic were part of that squad, as well as Moy and Jota and Starfelt. And so we've not brought in the same quality for those 5. I think the argument would be around probably Johnston for Juranovic. I don't know if he's quite there yet. I think he showed last season that he was a proper player. This season his form's been up and down. So 4 players of quality lost without being properly replaced. That's huge. It's a third of your team. So we definitely need surgery in January.
I've seen enough in the last few games to tell me how much surgery needs done in January. I don't need to see it in the next 3 games. What I want to see in the next 3 games is if it's a lot of these players' last hurrah at Celtic, which it may well be, then go out all guns blazing. Don't go out with, don't go out and make your last few games a memory that we all will just easily forget. And you don't want that to happen to players. I mean, it would be great if the decision has been made. Say Mikey Johnson has a man of the match performance on Saturday. Does that mean to say that I want him to be the future and start for, like, I see a future where he's starting for Celtic and he's like in the same bracket as a Maeda or a Kyogo or a Matt O'Reilly? I just don't see that happening. But
nothing.
You would far rather go out with a bang than just go out with a kind of, oh well, I'm not good enough, and sort of have your head down or whatever. I mean, he might not play at all on Saturday after the previous weekend. I don't know. It's an interesting approach to the team selection and the team lineup being announced on Saturday. I mean, you obviously could pick a few guarantees. I don't think there's going to be any wild inclusions, but it's who from that group does he start in that game?
I've got an idea. because I've been thinking about it, JP. I've been thinking about playing to your strengths, trying to look at the core group and saying these are the guys I can rely on for different reasons. Obviously, if Rio Atati was fit, he would be one of them, but he's not. Joe Hart's got to start, right? I mean, he's coming for loads of criticism, but what's your alternative? Joe Hart has got to start. And you've got to say to Joe, like what he was doing, putting the arm around Lagerbielke after the game against Feyenoord, he needs to play a captain's role. He needs to be a leader. He's not commanding enough in his box, JP. He's one of the main reasons we're so weak and we're so easy to score against. So Joe Hart, I would say AJ, but if you're going to change the shape, he might not actually start if you're going to change the shape. Carter Vickers, Callum McGregor, Matt O'Reilly. They're your three givens. Week in, week out. There's your three givens. And Carter Vickers has been struggling with injury. Maida's back, got to get him back in the team, play to his strengths and Kyogo's strengths. Obviously, when Abada comes back, he'll be the same as Rio. He'll come right back into the team. Kyogo, similarly to Hart, you're going to have to sit him down and say, listen, we need you to raise your levels here. And you're looking at Scales this season. Scales starts. There's no way you're dropping them. And then anybody around about that group of players there, GP, they've got to come and prove that they're worthy of the jersey.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're having to go to the well with the same players, but at the same time, those players will not have experienced that before on Saturday, where and there was booing at half time, whether that was at the ref or not, I don't know, or whether it was at the board or whoever. But I mean, the booing was quite apparent, and you're not getting away from it. And as they took their walk around the pitch at the end, there was booing at that point as well. I mean, they surely have to have taken that on board and want to show a reaction to that, because that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a reaction on Saturday similar to the reaction that Rodgers got from them at half-time in Perth only 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a different season. This is the same season. So the same players have got it in them to react to adversity. It's just they haven't done it consistently, and they haven't given us any reason to be confident about them doing it consistently, because there's draws in there at Easter Road, there's draws at home against St Johnstone, against Motherwell. I'm pretty sure we haven't won 3 back-to-back games this season.
All season.
So that is an indicator to us as fans that we can't rely on this team to go 3 games in a row winning, and they have to prove to us that they can do that. And certainly in the next 3 games, if there was ever 3 games to win back-to-back, then it would be these ones.
This is it. There's a few big talking points I want to throw at you for the last couple of minutes, JP. First one, Green Brigade.
Yeah. I knew that was
coming.
mean,
we're at loggerheads, aren't they? Nothing seems to be moving, or it's moving at a snail's pace.
It's daft now. I mean, I wouldn't say we necessarily were outsang by the Hearts support on Saturday, because there wasn't much of them to do it, but it's hamstringing us in a way that is so unnecessary. And to think that this has all been going on for 9-10 weeks or something like that now. I mean, how can that not be resolved? You're talking about adults having a conversation about whether or not some people should be allowed in the ground. If anybody's done anything so heinous that they don't deserve to be in a football ground, attacking anybody or anything like that, then those individuals surely could be identified and then they're punished by law or whatever. I mean, I don't agree.
Deal with them directly.
I don't agree with anybody doing anything that is, above the law. If you've done something, you deserve to be punished for it. But however many people, if you're trying to tell me that 260 people or 270 people have all broken the law, then I'd be very surprised if that's the case. And it's just affecting. I mean, people will say you should be able to sing or whatever, but like I said previously, the support and the fan base have become accustomed and probably a bit lazy into just letting the Green Brigade or the boys or the two of them together start the songs and ignite what we all know is a great atmosphere at Celtic Park. Whenever that gets going and it spreads around the ground, that's why it's become a place where people don't really want to come. When we're on song, we look at the night against them in February with the lights, and we just ran over the top of them. And that was when everybody was in complete and utter full voice. People probably had taken afternoons off work and everything else, and everyone was well oiled for that night. And what a night it was! And that was only 2 years ago, so, or a year and a half. I can't remember. Time is, I don't know what time is anymore. But that needs to be rectified, and it needs to be rectified before the 30th, because you just don't want you want us to be in the best position as a club on the park and off the park for that game. Why would we hamstring ourselves in a situation like that when surely it can be resolved? Like I said, it's not. This is not some sort of debate between two countries about anything overly serious. This is just about a supporter base or a supporters group being allowed into a ground to watch their team that they support. How does it get to this point where we're at this?
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. The example I used yesterday, JP, is I don't know if you're a member of a CSC, but anybody who has been, if you were to get a letter through the door saying that, because obviously the 270 approximately members that we're talking about are members of a CSC at the ticket office, and that's why you can identify every single member of the Green Brigade in that respect. If you were a member of a CSC and you got a letter through the door because some steamer did something at the game the previous week, you wouldn't expect to be punished for that. They might not even sit anywhere near you. You would not expect to be punished because you travel in the same bus and you pay your annual membership to the CSC. You would not expect that you would be up in uproar. But because it's the Green Brigade, it's almost as if different set of rules, JP. And I know there's a charter that they've agreed to. But within that charter, if one person disobeys that or breaks the rules, surely the whole group cannot be condemned for that. And it worries me that there is a train of thought that the club don't want them back. And there isn't going to be that resolution, and there's not going to be that sit down, because that unity that we've been talking about is never going to be there if a massive, vocal, influential section of the fan base, which for me has got a huge amount of support. I'm not a member of the Green Brigade. I think on one occasion I've been in amongst them at a cup game, which was fun. I really enjoyed it. But when I go, I go and sit down. I'm getting a wee bit old for that. I'm a bit old and grey, JP. I agree with loads of their political viewpoints. I think their charity work is phenomenal. And then we get onto the atmosphere that they actually inject into the stadium, which is now really, really lacking. Get them back in. Do what you need to do. Get around the table, sort it out. Because we're talking about
adults. It's embarrassing. It's like falling out with somebody at school and then just like stubbornly falling out with them for the rest of the day or the rest of the school week or whatever. It's like somebody just force them to like shake hands and get on with it.
They've made their point. Let's resolve it now. So that's a big one as well. Going into the game at the weekend, we will obviously cover it as we always do. We'll be back tomorrow at 12:30. Well over 1,000 getting stuck in about the topics in the comments field. Thank you all for getting involved just before Christmas as well. We will be streaming live right up, and if the contributors are unavailable, I'll just keep it going. We interviewed Mialby the other night, and we filmed it as well, JP. So we filmed the whole night. We'll have a highlights package and the wee backstage interview that we did with the big man as well. And we'll stick that out on Christmas Day so that I don't have to do any work on Christmas Day. Looking forward to that.
I'll be in Ireland next Thursday, so I won't be available. I'll be in... Where will I be on Thursday? I'll be in Killarney. That's where I'll be. So
nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Never been before, so I'm going over to see a band that I've done a bunch of shows with over here called the Coronas. They're huge in Ireland, so going to see them. I'm looking forward.
Brilliant.
We had Killarney today.
You'll be missed, JP, but enjoy it, and enjoy, obviously, Christmas as well. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. I've been Paul John Dykes. Thank you very much to JP Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.